Okay, so we're going to call the case of the United States versus Kara Baskin. My name is Judge Coley. At this time, I see that all of our scoring judges have turned off their video. I just want to make sure that all scoring judges also turn off their audio, and you're going to keep those off until the end of the trial, and you can turn them back on for comments. Also, make sure you set your settings to hide all non-video participants, so you should only be seeing me and the two advocates right now. Unless there are any issues, can we have the attorneys make their appearances, please?
Good afternoon, Your Honor, members of the jury. My name is Desai, and today I represent the government.
Good evening, Your Honor, members of the jury and opposing counsel. My name is Tyler Chin-Lenn, counsel for Kara Bassett, and I am joined today by my co-counsel, Ms. Ariana Medina, who will be assisting me in the technological aspects of today's trial.
Fantastic. Thank you guys for being here. We're going to start with opening statements from the prosecution. Everyone, please make sure that you're in speaker view, and you'll find that button in the upper right hand of your screen. And advocates, make sure that you mute your audio when the other attorney is speaking.
Yes, Your Honor. However,
and Ms. Desai, sorry, go ahead.
My apologies, Your Honor. I was just going to say, before we get into opening statements, the government does have a few preliminary matters we'd like to take care of.
Sure.
First, Your Honor, we'd like to note for the court that Exhibits 4 through 33 have already been admitted in today's trial and can be used in statements and examinations.
Sounds good.
Next, Your Honor, we'd like to ask that all witnesses barring each party's party representative be constructively sequestered.
Any objections?
No, Your Honor. We would just like to note for the court that Ms. Kara Bassett will be in court today and will be acting as our party representative. However, she will not be testifying.
Okay. Noted.
And with that, Your Honor, the government is ready to proceed.
Any preliminary matters from the defense?
No, Your Honor, the defense is ready to proceed as well.
Okay, Ms. Desai, go ahead and proceed when you're ready.
Yes, Your Honor. When he went missing, she made millions. May it please the court, opposing counsel, members of the jury. It's August 18th, 2017. Don Clark is scared. He's scared the defendant is going to kill him in his sleep. You see, like every couple, when Don and the defendant got married, they made an agreement. Except theirs was a little different. You'll hear that Don Clark was a wealthy man with a net worth of $8 million. And according to his power of attorney, if for whatever reason he were to go missing, the defendant would gain control of his assets. So on August 18, 2017, the defendant poisoned her husband and dumped his body in a local swamp. 1 week passes. The defendant doesn't call her husband, doesn't text him, doesn't look for him. 2 months pass, and the defendant invokes her husband's power of attorney and takes control of his assets. And 1 year passes. The defendant declares him dead. When he went missing, she made millions. And you see, as a government, we have to prove to you beyond a reasonable doubt today that Kara Bassett killed Don Clark intentionally. Now remember, members of the jury, that beyond a reasonable doubt does not mean beyond all doubt. It's doubt based on logic and reason. We'll meet our burden today by showing you the threats, the toxin, and the tracks. First, the threats. The threats the defendant made to the victim. You'll learn that just 2 months before Don Clark went missing, the defendant threatened to kill him. You'll learn that they often fought about control over their business, and that these fights got so bad, Don Clark was afraid the defendant was going to kill him in his sleep. Second, the toxin. The toxin the defendant used to kill her husband. You learn that Dawn and the defendant ran a zoo together, and that at this zoo, a lethal toxin called carfentanil was present. You learn that the defendant had access to this toxin. She was the last one to use it, and on the night in question, one syringe of carfentanil went missing. And third, the tracks. The tracks that connect the defendant to this crime. The evidence will show that the defendant dumped Don Clark's body at a swamp called Big Gum Swamp. We're going to show you a forensic report today, which shows that algae found on the defendant's boots matches the algae found at Big Gum Swamp and on both pedals of the van that drove to Big Gum Swamp on the night in question. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I know it's hard to believe a wife would do something like this. It's hard to believe that a wife would kill her husband for $8 million. But you have to listen to the evidence today. And that evidence will show that when he went missing, she made millions. That's why at the conclusion of today's trial, I'm going to ask you to find the defendant guilty. Thank you.
Opening, Your Honor.
Yes, go ahead and proceed when you're ready.
May it please the court. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, you saw what the government just did. They tried to coerce you into thinking my client is guilty by creating an elaborately malicious persona out of Miss Bassett. They tried to convince you that she was engaged in a middle-of-the-night murder plot. But allow me to tell you the truth about Miss Bassett. Miss Bassett is a woman who takes care of orphaned and abused elephants daily. She feeds them, she washes them, she makes sure they're safe. But instead of saving orphaned and abused elephants daily, today it's her life that is on the line. And her life is on the line today because you will see that she went to sleep on the night of August 18th of 2017. And when she awoke, her husband left her. Her husband abandoned her. Her husband walked out on her. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, when did it become a crime in the United States of America to go to sleep? Because that's exactly what Ms. Desai and the government wants you to do today. They want you to send an abandoned widow to jail for simply going to sleep. And today the government bears the burden of proof. They have to prove to you beyond a reasonable doubt, beyond hesitation, beyond moral certainty, that Kara Bassett killed her husband, Don Clark. But ladies and gentlemen of the jury, all you will see in today's trial is the government's neglection of the truth. And that neglection of the truth begins with the government's first and only witness, Senior Agent Branham. Now, Ms. Desai came before you a mere moments ago and told you that Agent Branham will testify that Kara Bassett, she killed Don Clark. However, Agent Branham is going to dispute this. Agent Branham is going to tell you that there's no eyewitnesses, that there's no expert witnesses, that there's no forensic data, that there's no written testimony, there's no written evidence, there's no visual evidence, and there's no medical evidence that can prove definitively Kara Bassett killed her husband, Don Clark. Ms. Desai also told you that Don Clark is dead, but Agent Branham is also going to dispute that claim. Agent Branham is going to come before you and tell you that there's no body, that there's no autopsy, that there's no medically confirmed death. He's going to tell you on the stand that there simply is no proof that Don Clark is dead. But the most important thing Agent Branham is going to tell you today is that the FBI, they didn't test. And ladies and gentlemen of the jury, if they didn't test, they cannot know. You will see today that the FBI, they didn't test the rocks, the grass, the bodies of water on Kara Bassett's property for algae. They simply believed that algae only grew at the Big Gum Swamp. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, they didn't test, so they cannot know. Now, as the defense, we don't have a burden in today's trial, but we will call a witness. Jo Young will take the stand and testify that she has over 2,000 hours of footage that exonerates Ms. Bassett. And you, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, are going to see that footage today. But the FBI, you will hear that the FBI, they didn't even want to see the footage. They didn't even conduct an interview. You will hear that the FBI simply neglected this footage. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, Kara Bassett is a woman who went to sleep on August 18th of 2017 and awoke to the crossfire of the government's neglection of the truth. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, at the end of today's trial, give Kara back her passion. Give Kara back her hope. Give Kara back her life. And find her the way she truly is, innocent. Thank you.
Okay, government, are you ready to call your first witness?
Yes, Your Honor. The government calls Agent Steph Branham to the stand.
Okay, and while we're waiting for the witness, scoring judges, can you please switch back to gallery view? And Ms. Desai, you can go ahead and proceed when you're ready.
Yes, Your Honor. Could you please introduce yourself to the members of the jury?
Sure. My name is Steph Branham, and I'm an FBI special agent.
How are you involved in today's case?
I was the lead investigator into the 2017 disappearance of 38-year-old Tallahassee resident Don Clark.
Do you specialize in any certain types of cases, Agent?
Yes, I work in the violent crime section of the FBI, so I specialize in cases just like this one: murders, serial murders, bank robberies, and more.
Did you receive any training at the FBI?
Yes, in 2002, I completed the 20-week, 800-hour academy training in Quantico, Virginia. And ever since then, I've completed annual training to keep up with the best methods that the FBI has to offer.
Did you receive any training in criminal investigations?
Yes, I did.
Agent, did you form an opinion in today's case to a reasonable degree of professional certainty?
Of course.
And what materials did you rely upon when forming this opinion?
I relied upon interviews, forensic evidence, and physical evidence.
And are these the type of materials you typically rely upon in your field?
Yes, these are the type of materials I was taught to rely on by my FBI academy training.
Your Honor, the government offers Agent Steph Branham as an expert in the field of criminal investigations with a specialty in violent crimes.
Okay, do we have any objections from the defense?
No, Your Honor, we have no objections for that designation.
Okay, so we'll accept him as an expert in that field.
Yes, Your Honor. Now, Agent, could you please state the FBI's conclusion to this jury?
Sure. It was my conclusion at the end of the investigation that the defendant, Kara Bassett, murdered Don Clark using a syringe of elephant tranquilizer, put his body into a van, drove that van to a swamp, and dumped his body there.
And what were the steps of the FBI's investigation that led you to this conclusion?
First, we conducted searches of the elephant park, the swamp, and the Carrie Bell Leon Airport, which is an airport very close to the park. Second, we collected physical and forensic evidence, particularly forensic evidence from the swamp I mentioned. And lastly, we conducted interviews of eyewitnesses and suspects.
Now, Agent, when Don Clark went missing, how did the FBI determine that he was in fact dead?
Well, see, we kept tab of his cell phone logs, his call activity, his credit cards, his bank account. And from August 18, 2017, all the way to today, there's been absolutely no activity on any of those accounts.
Thank you, Agent. Now, I want to talk about three things today: the threats, the toxin, and the tracks. So we're going to start off with the threats. Did you find any evidence of animosity between Don Clark and the defendant?
Yes. In June of 2017, Don Clark filed for protection against abuse before Ms. Bassett.
And is Exhibit 34 a fair and accurate copy of this petition that Don Clark filed?
Yes, it is.
Your Honor, the government offers Exhibit 34 into evidence.
Any objections?
Yes, Your Honor. We object to more prejudicial over probative.
Okay, can you explain?
Yes, Your Honor. The restraining order in today's case offers no probative value to the FBI's investigation. It doesn't establish any facts. It doesn't establish any relevant material. All it serves to do is implicate Ms. Bassett having prior threatened Don Clark. But Your Honor, correlation does not equal causation. You can, even though Ms. Bassett did this in the past, it doesn't mean she did it this time, and thus is more prejudicial over probative under Rule 403.
If I may respond, Your Honor.
Yes, and just to clarify, we're looking at Exhibit 34, right?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. Go ahead and respond.
Exhibit 34 is more probative than prejudicial. First off, Your Honor, FBI agent Branham testified that he relied upon this exhibit when forming his conclusion. So therefore, it did have a probative value to his conclusion itself. Furthermore, Your Honor, we're looking at the victim's mindset just 2 months before he disappeared, in which he says that the defendant threatened to kill him and that he's afraid the defendant is going to kill him in his sleep. Because of the closeness of the timeline between when the victim said these things to when he disappeared, Your Honor, this is more probative than prejudicial.
Your Honor, if I may respond,
Yes.
the timeline that Ms. Desai just mentioned, that is 60 days of time, Your Honor. That's not even remotely close to the date of the incident. And furthermore, there's no probative value. There's no relevant facts. There's not even facts inside of that restraining order. And that's we proffer the court that this is more prejudicial over probative.
If I may respond, Your Honor?
Ms. Desai is not necessary. Given the fact that this witness said that he relied on this document in his investigation, I'm going to allow it. I think that the jury can distinguish between 60 days or if it was the day before. So
Yes.
I'm going to let it in.
Yes, Your Honor. Attorney Dabrowski, can you please display Exhibit 34 for us on the screen? Now, Agent, can you read for us the words written in blue by Don Clark?
One moment, it's not showing up on my screen.
Of course. Just let me know when it's up there, Agent.
It's there now. This is the second time Kara has gotten angry enough to threaten to kill me. Let me run the park my way or I'm going to kill you. She told me to leave my own property. I own that property. I can't defend myself because she took my .357 revolver and hid it. I'm afraid she's going to kill me in my sleep.
Agent, how long after Don Clark said he's afraid the defendant's going to kill him in his sleep did he go missing?
Just 2 months, ma'am.
Thank you. I want to talk about why Don Clark might have been afraid. Can you walk us through Don Clark's assets?
Sure. Prior to his disappearance, Don Clark owned the Elephant Park, real estate investments, a used car lot, a vacation home in Costa Rica, vehicles including a private plane, and cash, stocks, and bonds that total to $1.9 million.
And who held these assets?
Don Clark did prior to his disappearance, like I was saying. However, in October of 2017, Ms. Bassett invoked a power of attorney form that granted her access to all of those assets.
Attorney Dabrowski, can you display Exhibit 15 for us? Agent, what clause of this power of attorney did the defendant invoke?
The clause that's on the screen,
In which clause in particular, the first or the second?
the disappearance clause.
And why was there a disappearance clause in this power of attorney?
We spoke with Don Clark's lawyer, Mandy Tuminelli, and she told us that the defendant insisted that clause be added.
You can take that exhibit down, Attorney Dabrowski. I now want to talk about the toxin. You mentioned earlier that the FBI concluded carfentanil was involved in Don Clark's death. What is carfentanil?
Carfentanil is a substance, a lethal substance that's commonly used in syringes of elephant tranquilizer. That's what my investigation found the elephant zoo used to tranquilize their elephants.
How lethal is carfentanil?
It's lethal in humans. Just 1 milligram is enough to kill an adult male.
Why do you believe that carfentanil was used to kill Don Clark?
When my team and I searched the zoo, we found a shed where they stored medical supplies and equipment. In particular, we found a logbook keeping track of when the park would use syringes of carfentanil.
Attorney Dabrowski, can you display that logbook for us, please? According to this log, how many syringes should have been there when you searched Elephant Park?
24 syringes.
How many syringes did you find?
My team and I searched that park thoroughly, and we only found 23.
Who was the last one to log out a syringe according to this document?
Kara Bassett.
Now, finally, Agent, I want to talk about the tracks. Attorney Dabrowski, can you display Exhibit 31 for us? According to these GPS records, when Don Clark's van left park property on August 18th, where did it go?
It was driven 139 miles from the park to a place called the Big Gum Swamp.
And did you find any evidence linking the defendant to Big Gum Swamp?
Yes, we found algae from that swamp on a pair of her shoes.
how can you be sure that the algae on her shoes is from Big Gum Swamp?
The algae on her boots and the algae from the swamp have the same Redfield ratio.
What is a Redfield ratio?
It's a precise ratio of carbon, nitrogen, and phosphorus that tell us where algae is from.
Agent, can you put that in simpler terms?
Sure, just like every person has their own unique fingerprint, all algae has its own unique Redfield ratio. And just like we can match prints to a person—
Objection, Your Honor. This is improper expert testimony. I believe Senior Agent Branham was specialized as an expert in criminal divisions, not in toxicology and/or chemistry or biology.
If I may, Your Honor.
Yes.
He was entered as an expert in criminal investigations with a specialty in violent crimes. When being tendered as an expert, he testified that he was trained in evidence collection, which would give him experience and training in forensic evidence in particular, which is what this algae evidence is.
Your Honor, may I respond?
Yes.
Just because Agent Branham had education in evidence collection doesn't mean he's a biochemist. It doesn't mean he's a professional biologist. What Ms. Desai is asking Agent Branham to do is tell us how a fingerprint and algae composition are similar. And he's not a biologist, so he cannot do that, Your Honor.
If I may, Your Honor.
Last word.
Well, this witness isn't providing any opinion on algae evidence. He's simply using an analogy to help aid the jury in understanding complicated evidence such as a Redfield ratio. He's not giving an opinion about that Redfield ratio, just putting it in simpler terms for us.
Okay. If he's not offering an opinion on it, then I'm going to allow it.
Yes, Your Honor. Agent, were you finished with your answer?
No, all I was saying is that just like we can match prints to a person, we can use the Redfield ratio to match a sample of algae to a location or origin.
And what did your Redfield ratio analysis tell you about the algae on the defendant's boots?
We determined that the algae from the boots was the same algae at the swamp, at the Big Gum Swamp.
Did you find this algae anywhere else?
Yes, we did, on the gas brake and pedal of the van that was driven to the swamp.
Now, Agent, when Dawn Clark went missing, did the defendant try to call or text her husband?
We obtained Ms. Bassett's call and text logs, and no, she did not.
Well, what did the defendant do?
First, she invoked Don Clark's power of attorney form, which granted her his $8 million fortune. Excuse me.
What is your final expert conclusion in today's case?
By looking at the tracks, the toxins, and the threats, we're able to determine that Miss Bassett killed Don Clark using a syringe of elephant tranquilizer, put his body into a van, drove that van to a swamp, and dumped his body there. After that, she reported him missing and collected all of his assets, including the $8 million fortune.
Thank you, Agent. I have nothing further, Your Honor.
Cross-examination?
Cross, Your Honor.
Yes. Go ahead when you're ready.
Agent Branham, isn't it true that you never found the body of Don Clark?
That's true. We were never able to recover that.
And thus, by definition, you don't have an autopsy report for us today, correct?
No, we don't have an autopsy.
Meaning, to this point, you received no medical confirmation that Don Clark died, correct?
No direct confirmation from an autopsy report, no.
Is it true up to this point, as we sit here in this courtroom, you still have received no medical confirmation that Don Clark is dead, correct?
Yes, like I said, we weren't able to perform an autopsy since we weren't able to locate the body in the swamp.
And just to clarify for the jury, it is your testimony here today that there exists no medical evidence Don Clark is dead. Is that an accurate depiction of your testimony?
Yes, like I said.
And isn't it true you never found an eyewitness that saw Don Clark die?
No, we believe that Miss Bassett carried this murder out after the park had closed around 11 p.m.
But Agent Branham, just to clarify, no eyewitnesses, correct?
Yes, you're correct.
It isn't true that the FBI team you lead, out of all their interviews, they never found an eyewitness that saw Don Clark die. Is that a true statement?
That's true.
And just to clarify for the jury, it is your testimony here today. As you sit here, there have been no eyewitnesses that have come forward and can definitively tell you Don Clark is dead, correct?
Yes, like I said.
Agent Branham, isn't it true you also reviewed camera footage to assist in your investigation?
Of course, yes.
And isn't it true that in all the hours of the footage you reviewed, it never shows Don Clark's death?
Yes, the cameras were mainly focused on the park itself, not so much the property.
But no Don Clark's death. Is that an accurate statement?
That's true.
That camera footage also never shows Kara Bassett removing the carfentanil from the shed you mentioned earlier, correct?
No, again, it was focused mainly on the elephant enclosures. The park live streamed it on its website so people could see it.
But you have no evidence that Kara Bassett removed the carfentanil from the shed, correct?
No evidence from the footage, no.
Do you have evidence at all?
Based off of the fact that a syringe went missing the day Mr. Clark did as well, and
But
the fact that Kara Bassett had access to the log and was in fact the one that ordered those syringes, that was what led us to believe that she took the syringe.
But Agent Branham, you don't have DNA evidence for us today that can prove that, correct?
You're correct.
You have no written evidence that can prove that today, correct?
That's true.
You have no eyewitness evidence that can prove that today, correct?
Again, no eyewitness evidence.
No documentation?
That's true.
Furthermore, when you investigated Ms. Bassett's property, you found no signs of blood, correct?
No, we didn't.
And you found no signs of struggle?
Yes.
You found no signs of vomit residue?
No.
So just to clarify for the jury, you didn't find any evidence that can prove Don Clark is dead, definitively, correct?
I wouldn't say that we can rule out that he's dead. Certainly no.
Did you find any, isn't it true you didn't find any evidence that can prove Don Clark is dead?
Not any of the evidence that you mentioned, like the vomit residue or the blood.
So no evidence.
That's true. The ones you're referring to.
Thus, Agent Branham, isn't it true you can't prove Don Clark is definitively dead?
We believe we can based off of the evidence and the circumstantial evidence that we collected. But if you're looking for direct evidence, that's true, no.
Well, let's talk about some of that evidence you mentioned on direct. Let's talk about that. Isn't it true your team took samples from the water at Big Gum Swamp to test that algae composition?
That's true.
And isn't it true you didn't test the elephant sanctuary's bodies of water?
That's true. But like I was saying, given the unusual Redfield ratio, we're able to link the algae to the swamp.
Yes, but isn't it true that it is possible that that Redfield ratio was also at the swamp?
I suppose it's remotely possible, but my team and I still found it highly likely that the algae originated.
And it's only possible that it's at that swamp because you didn't test the swamp, correct?
We didn't test the swamp?
I mean, you didn't test the park, correct?
Yes, that's true.
Would you be able to recognize for the jury the airplane you uncovered at the airport?
Yes, I would.
Ms. Medina, can you please put up that airplane on the screen for us? And while she does that, Senior Agent Branham, isn't it true that Don Clark had a 2-engine Cessna plane?
Yes, that's the plane displayed in Exhibit 27, it looks like.
But that plane that's displayed in Exhibit 27 is a single engine, correct? Because the engine and the propeller are on the front?
I don't know a lot about planes, but that's true, yes.
But he also owned a double engine plane, is that correct?
I believe that's so.
And you never found this double engine plane?
It was not parked at the Caribel Leon Airport, no.
Let's talk about Miss Bassett now. Isn't it true you found no eyewitness testimony that can prove Miss Bassett was awake past 9 p.m. on the night of August 18th of 2017?
We believe that it was just Miss Bassett and Mr. Clark at the park at that point, but yes, you're right.
And isn't it true Miss Bassett herself told you in her FBI interview countless times she was asleep at 9 p.m. on August 18th of 2017?
Objection
That's what she told us.
to hearsay.
Response?
Permission to respond, Your Honor?
Yes.
This does not go to the truth of the matter asserted. This is just circumstantial evidence that Senior Agent Branham has personal knowledge to since he was in the interview.
If I may respond, Your Honor,
Yes.
that statement is going for the truth of the matter asserted. We heard countless times in opposing counsel's opening statement that according to them, Kara Bassett was asleep on the night in question. So the statement that Kara Bassett said, "I was asleep," is being used for the truth.
I submit my argument for the court, Your Honor.
Okay, I'm going to allow it because I think defense is offering this specific statement to the integrity of the investigation rather than its actual truth. It sounds like he's going to get that from somewhere else, so I'm going to allow it.
Yes, Your Honor.
Senior Agent Branham, I'll re-ask the question. Isn't it true Ms. Bassett told you countless times that she was asleep in all the interviews you conducted?
That is what she told us.
So just to clarify for the jury, you had testimony that you had evidence that Ms. Bassett was asleep, correct?
We have testimony from Ms.
Objection,
Bassett
Your Honor.
that she was asleep.
I re-raise my objection to hearsay. Based on counsel's previous question that you have evidence the defendant was asleep, we can see that they are using that statement for the truth of the matter asserted to prove that she was in fact asleep.
Your Honor, may I respond?
Yes.
This goes directly to the investigation as you have previously ruled. What we're doing here is we're proving that Senior Agent Branham has neglected the truth during his investigation.
If I may respond, Your Honor?
Yes.
Just as opposing counsel stated, they are using it for the truth. If they're trying to use it that this witness neglected the truth, that implies that the statement that Kara Bassett said was indeed true, which means they are using it for the truth of the matter asserted, and under Rule 801, that's prohibited.
Defense, I have a question. Do you have other evidence that Miss Bassett was asleep at 9 o'clock? Or is this your only evidence of that?
It is just her testimony that Agent Branham was there and witnessed.
Yes, Your Honor. Only the defendant claims that she was asleep that night.
Right, okay, so I guess my question is this the only line of questioning that goes to the fact that she was asleep, or are we gonna hear something else about this?
Your Honor, this is the only line of questioning that goes to that fact, and my next question actually was that Senior Agent Branham has no evidence that she was even awake.
Okay, if that's the case, then I'm actually going to sustain the objection, because it sounds like it's no longer just going to the integrity in the investigation, rather the fact that she was asleep. But your previous question still remains on the record.
Yes, Your Honor.
Motion to strike the latter part of the latter question, Your Honor.
Granted.
Yes, Your Honor.
Senior Agent Branham, I have one more question for you.
Okay.
Isn't it true you found no evidence that Miss Bassett was awake?
No direct evidence.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Any redirect?
Yes, Your Honor, briefly.
Yes.
Agent, opposing counsel asked you a lot about evidence if Don Clark is dead. I want to make it clear. What evidence did you find that after 3 years, Don Clark is in fact dead?
That he is in fact dead? Sorry, I didn't catch the last part.
Yes, that he is dead.
Well, really, we focus mainly on circumstantial evidence in determining what happened to Mr. Clark. See, the missing syringe, the trip to the swamp in the early morning, the fact that Miss Bassett was the one who handled most of the syringes of elephant tranquilizer, all lead us to believe that Miss Bassett was the one who was responsible. There's no evidence that Don Clark is still alive at all.
Thank you, Agent. Nothing further.
I have a recross, Your Honor. One question.
Is recross permitted in this jurisdiction? I'm
Yes,
actually not
Judge
sure.
Foley.
Okay, go ahead.
Senior Agent Branham, you mentioned that you had circumstantial evidence that can prove Kara Bassett killed Don Clark. But do you have any definitive evidence that can prove it directly?
We don't have direct evidence, but like you said, we do have circumstantial.
Just to clarify the jury, you have no direct evidence that can prove Kara Bassett killed Don Clark.
Yes, that's true.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Okay, I'm assuming there's no redirect.
No, Your Honor.
Okay, you may be excused. And defense, are you ready to call your witness?
Yes, Your Honor. If the government rests its case, we are.
The government does rest, Your Honor.
Then, Your Honor, at this time, the defense counsel on behalf of Kara Bassett would like to call Joe Young to the stand.
Okay. Go ahead and proceed whenever you're ready.
Ms. Young, can you see and hear me okay?
I can.
And can you please introduce yourself to the jury?
Hi, my name is Joe Young. I'm a filmmaker. I make wildlife documentaries mixed with a bit of reality TV. So if you ever see any of that, I'm behind it.
And Ms. Young, how did you get into filmmaking?
Well, it all started back in high school. You know, I always thought I'd be in front of the camera, but I was in my high school's production of The Wizard of Oz, and I was cast as a yellow brick. So I decided to get behind the camera, become a filmmaker.
And how did you get involved with Kara Bassett as a filmmaker?
About 5 years ago now, she called me, said she had an opportunity to film a documentary for her. So I said, of course.
And what did you film in this documentary?
I filmed Kara with the elephants, Kara with her employees, just trying to get a sense of life at the park.
And you mentioned that you filmed Kara. What did Kara normally wear at the park?
Well, the clothes changed from day to day, but there was this pair of tan work boots. She wore those all the time.
And would you be able to recognize these tan work boots for the jury today?
I would.
Your Honor, at this time, permission to share my screen and to display Exhibit 29, which has already been pre-admitted into evidence under Pretrial Order 7.
Go ahead.
Ms. Medina, can you please put up Exhibit 29 onto the screen for us? Now, Ms. Young, whose boots are these?
These are Kara's.
And based on the time you were there at the park filming, can you explain what you saw Kara Bassett do in these boots?
I really saw her do everything. She would care for the elephants in the boots. She would walk around the park in the boots.
And where would Kara Bassett take care of her elephants while she was working?
Well, the elephants were kept in these kind of cages, at least for the beginning of the time I was filming. So I would see her, wearing these boots around those cages. They were often, kind of muddy. I think that's why they're so dirty.
And Ms. Bassett, you mentioned that you took footage of this. About how much footage do you have of Ms. Bassett working and anything regarding the documentary?
I think at this point, I must have over 2,000 hours.
Now, you said you recorded this footage. Did you show the FBI any of this footage to assist in their investigation?
I would have loved to. I kind of thought it was my masterpiece. But apparently the FBI didn't think so. They never asked to see it.
And since you were there every day, did you ever sit down and conduct an interview with the FBI to assist in their investigation?
No, I would have loved to. I felt like I had a lot to say. But the FBI, they never asked me to conduct an interview with them.
I'm now going to ask you some questions about Don Clark. Are you prepared to answer them?
Sure.
Firstly, would you be able to identify Don Clark for the jury?
Yes.
Your Honor, at this time, permission to share my screen to display Exhibit 6, which has already been pre-admitted into evidence under Pretrial Order 7.
Sure. And if you're going to display exhibit that's already in evidence, you don't need to ask. You guys can just go ahead.
Yes, Your Honor. Ms. Medina, can you please put up Exhibit 6 for us? Ms. Young, is this the Don Clark you knew?
Yes, that's Don with an elephant behind him.
And how many years did you know Don Clark?
A lot of years. I filmed them for about 2 years. That's Kara and Don.
And what was your daily interaction with Don like?
I saw him, every day. Sometimes we would talk to each other. I would get him on film. I thought I knew him pretty well.
Ms. Young, I'm now going to ask you some questions about August 18th of 2017. First off, were you at the park that day?
I was. At first, it was just a normal day.
And you mentioned earlier that you were there 5 days a week, 10 hours a day, since 2015. Was there anything out of the ordinary on August 18th of 2017?
I don't think so. Everything seemed pretty normal.
And did you ever interact with Kara that day?
I did. I talked to her a little bit.
Did you ever interact with Don that day?
Yes. I actually had kind of an odd conversation with him at the end of the day.
And without telling me what that conversation was about, can you describe that conversation for us?
Sure. I was just talking to him. And, usually I feel like he's kind of listening to what I'm saying. But on that day, he kind of just looked at his phone and walked away without saying anything.
Ms. Young, I'm now going to ask you some questions about Don's disappearance. Firstly, did you continue filming after Don's disappearance?
I did.
And do you mind giving the jury an example of what you filmed during that time?
Well, I filmed Kara. I filmed the FBI also.
And in this film, what did the FBI do? What did you capture them doing?
I saw them doing a lot of things. I saw them going around the park every day, for a little bit at least. And and I saw them, interviewing some people. I did think it was a little strange, though. I saw some FBI agents carrying things without gloves.
And you mentioned earlier the FBI never wanted to see the footage from before Don's disappearance. Did they request the footage you took of them while they were at the property?
No, I mean, I thought the footage was getting better and better every day, but apparently the FBI didn't.
Now, Miss Young, you mentioned you filmed Kara. Did you film her reaction to Don's disappearance?
I did. I took a few interviews of her.
And would you be able to recognize this footage for us?
Sure.
Miss Young, can you please look at Exhibit 39 in your Google Drive or trial binder?
Yes, I have this up now.
Is this the same video as when you first took it?
Yes, this looks like a video I took in about August of 2017.
Your Honor, I move to have what has been previously marked as Exhibit 39 into evidence.
Any objections?
No objections, Your Honor.
Okay, it's in.
Ms. Vaughn?
Ms. Medina, can you please put Exhibit 39 up onto the screen for me? And play it when you're ready.
My husband is gone. It's been more than a week. He hasn't called or texted or anything. I don't know where he's at, and I'm really worried about him.
Ms. Young, I have one final question here today. Is this footage you took of Kara after her husband disappeared?
Yes, it is. It's in the week after.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Cross?
Yes, Your Honor. Now, Ms. Young, you often saw the defendant and Don Clark fight, right?
Yes, I did see a few fights.
They would fight about control and direction of their business, correct?
Yes, I think I saw a few of those.
Now, those fights happened in front of you, but you aren't sure if they fought when you weren't around, right?
I mean, that's true. I was at the park a lot, but I guess for the couple of days I wasn't there, that's true.
Ma'am, it's not just a couple of days. You weren't there in the night, were you?
Oh, of course, that's true.
You don't know if the defendant threatened Don during this time?
I mean, I didn't sneak into the park in the night. I don't know.
So I want to talk about a fight that happened when you weren't there. Attorney Dabrowski, can you display what's already been entered as Exhibit 34 for us? Ms. Young, you recognize this handwriting, don't you?
I think so. This looks like Dawn's.
And in this petition, Don Clark says that the defendant has threatened to kill him. I read that correctly?
Yes, that's what it looks like.
He says he's afraid the defendant is going to kill him in his sleep. I read that correctly, Ms. Young?
Looks like it says that there.
I want to talk about why Don Clark might be afraid. Attorney Dabrowski, can you get Exhibit 4 up for us? Ms. Young, this is a letter from Don Clark's attorney. I'm just going to ask you if I'm reading this document correctly. It says here that Don Clark owned Elephant Park and its assets, right?
Yes, it says it right there.
He owned multiple real estate properties, correct?
That's what it says.
He owned a used car lot.
I guess that's true, yes.
Multiple expensive cars.
Yes.
A vacation home.
That's true, I think in Costa Rica.
And $1.9 million in cash, stocks, and bonds. I'm reading this correctly, right?
Yes, you are.
Now, Ms. Young, I want to be clear here. The defendant didn't have any assets or income of her own, right?
I don't think so. At least she told me she didn't.
The But to be clear, according to this document, there was a way the defendant could gain control of her husband's assets, right?
It looks like it, yes.
It says right here that the defendant could gain control of all of the assets you just talked about if her husband went missing. Right, Ms. Young?
Yes, it looks like that. You know, I've never seen this before, but I think that's what it says.
And Ms. Young, I want to talk about a video you filmed of Kelsey Stebbins. But before we get there, I want to make something clear for the jury. Now, Kara Bassett had a prominent role at Elephant Park, right?
She did.
She was the one who hired you, Ms. Young. Is that right?
Yes, 5 years ago. It feels like yesterday.
She authorized you to film employees at the park, correct?
She did.
One of these employees that she authorized you to film was Kelsey Stebbins, correct?
That's true. I did a number of interviews with her, actually.
And you're familiar with Exhibit 46, a video you filmed of Kelsey Stebbins?
Yes, I am.
And Exhibit 46 is a fair and accurate representation of the video you filmed, right?
I can get that up now if you would like.
Yes.
Okay, yes, this looks accurate.
Your Honor, the government offers Exhibit 46 into evidence.
Any objections?
No objections, Your Honor. We would just ask in regulation with Rule 106 that all of the videos that Joe Young took of Miss Kelsey Stebbins get entered into evidence pursuant to Rule 106.
Ms. Desai, is that okay with you?
Yes, Your Honor, as long as they're entered into evidence and the jury can look at them.
Okay, sounds good. So all the videos of Kelsey are going to be in.
Yes, Your Honor. Attorney Dabrowski, can you play Exhibit 46 for us?
I do a count of the tranquilizers every Friday, and August 18th was no different. When I left at 6 p.m., they were all there. 24 syringes.
Miss Young, Kelsey Stebbins just told us that on the night Dawn Clark disappeared, she counted those syringes, right?
That's what she just said.
She said that she counted 24 syringes in that shed. I heard that correctly?
Yes.
Now, I want to talk about what happened after Dawn Clark went missing. Miss Young, you have a professional relationship with Dawn Clark, right?
I do. I like to think I know him pretty well at this point.
And when he went missing, you flew all the way to Costa Rica to try and find him, didn't you?
I did. You know, I thought it would be a good part of the documentary, and obviously I was worried about him, so I went to Costa Rica.
Right, you were worried, and so you stayed there for a week, correct?
I did. I went in June of 2018, stayed there for a week, you know, looking around.
Exactly, you were trying to find Dawn Clark, correct?
Yes, that's true.
Let's talk about what the defendant did after her husband went missing. Attorney Dabrowski, can you please display the defendant's phone records for us? Now, Ms. Young, you went all the way to Costa Rica to try and find Dawn Clark, but the defendant didn't even text or call her husband, right?
Well, it doesn't look like it here.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
Redirect, Your Honor.
Yes.
Ms. Young, Ms. Desai came before you and asked you if you look at some interviews that you did with Kelsey Stebbins. Can you please look in your electronic folder at Exhibit 45, which is pre-admitted to evidence?
Yes,
And is this an interview that you took with Kelsey Stebbins?
it is.
Ms. Medina, can you please put Exhibit 45 up on the screen for us?
Objection, Your Honor. Before they display that video, we'd object to outside the scope of cross-examination.
Your Honor, may I respond?
Yes.
On cross-examination, they brought up a portion of the interview of Ms. Stebbins, and it's already been admitted into evidence as our last objection battle concluded. We asked this would not be on the scope of cross-examination as they brought up the Kelsey Stebbins interview on cross-examination.
If I may, Your Honor.
Yes.
We agree that Exhibit 45 may be entered into evidence. However, on cross-examination, I only asked this witness about Exhibit 46, a very particular part of the interview. That doesn't open the door for opposing counsel to talk about anything with Kelsey Stebbins. This is outside the scope of what I asked this witness on cross-examination, which was only related to Exhibit 46.
Your Honor, may I respond?
No need. I'm going to allow it.
Yes, Your Honor.
Ms. Medina, can you please play Exhibit 45 for the jury?
One day, Don came up to me and shook his head. He said, "Have you ever thought about just leaving it all behind? No goodbyes, no see you laters, just up and leaving in the middle of the night?"
Now,
One
Ms.
day,
Young, now, Ms. Young, this is a video of Kelsey Stebbins.
Yes, it is.
And did she work at the park?
She did. She was one of the employees. I like to interview her pretty frequently.
And did she interact with Don daily?
She did.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Anything further from this witness? I'm going to take that as a no. You may be excused. Defense, do you have anything else?
No, Your Honor, at this time, the defense rests its case.
Okay, are you guys ready to proceed to closings, or do you need a moment?
The government is ready, Your Honor.
Defense counsel is also ready, Your Honor.
Okay, can I get the scoring judges to switch to speaker view? And besides that, Ms. Desai, you can proceed whenever you're ready.
Yes, Your Honor. When he went missing, she made millions. May it please the court, opposing counsel, members of the jury. $8 million. That's what the defendant saw when she looked at her husband. That's what she saw when she added a disappearance clause to his power of attorney. And that's what she saw when she poisoned him with carfentanil, dumped his body in a swamp, and carried on as if nothing had happened. Because the defendant knew that when he went missing, she made millions. Now, as a government, we had to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Kara Bassett killed Don Clark. And I want to make something clear. We can meet that burden with only circumstantial evidence. And your members of the jury, I know it's hard to believe that a wife would do something like this, but you have to look at the evidence. So let's start at the beginning. Let's start with first the threats. Now, you saw Don Clark's power of attorney, which was drafted in May of 2017. And you saw the disappearance clause that the defendant insisted be put in. Why? Because that clause stated that if Don Clark went missing, the defendant would make $8 million. So what happens just 2 months after the defendant adds that disappearance clause? She starts to threaten her husband. You saw the petition for protection against abuse that Don Clark filed. You saw the words he wrote in blue in which he says he's scared the defendant is going to kill him in his sleep. And what happens? Just 2 months after that petition, ladies and gentlemen, Don Clark is gone. Nowhere to be seen. And what does the defendant do? She doesn't call him. She doesn't text him. She doesn't look for him. Instead, she invokes his power of attorney and makes $8 million. Because she knew that when he went missing, she made millions. And now second, the toxin. You learned about carfentanil today. And you learned that just 1 milligram of carfentanil can kill a human adult. The defendant had access to this toxin. She was the last one to log a syringe out. And she ordered carfentanil for the park. You saw that video of Kelsey Stebbins. Ms. Stebbins told you that as of 6 p.m. on August 18, 2017, there were 24 syringes in that shed. But Agent Branham told you that they only found 23. Ladies and gentlemen, only 2 people were on park property that night. The defendant and her husband. And that night, 1 syringe of carfentanil went missing, and so did the defendant's husband. And third, the tracks. You saw the GPS records from Don Clark's van. You saw that someone drove that van to Big Gum Swamp on August 18th. Now, Agent Branham told you that they found algae on the gas and brake pedal of that van. So, ladies and gentlemen, someone got out of that van, stepped in some algae at Big Gum Swamp, and got back in that van. So someone has algae on their boots. Agent Branham told you that the algae on the defendant's boots has precisely the same Redfield ratio as the algae in Big Gum Swamp and the algae on the gas and brake pedal of that van. That someone drove that van and dumped Don Clark's body was the defendant. Now today, Agent Branham told you about the threats, the toxin, and the tracks. But you don't need to be an FBI agent to understand the most disturbing evidence you heard today. You saw the defendant's phone records. When her husband went missing, she didn't call him. She didn't text him. She didn't call the police. She didn't look for him. Ladies and gentlemen, use your common sense. What's the first thing you do when someone you know goes missing? You call them. You text them. You look for them because you're worried and you want them to come home, but the defendant never called her husband because she knew exactly where he was. She knew that when he went missing, she made millions. Find the defendant guilty. Thank you.
Closing, Your Honor.
Yes.
May it please the court. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, Kara Bassett joins us today in this courtroom, reflecting upon how she was going to move on with life after her husband abandoned her. Kara Bassett is like all of us, driven by a desire for progressive change, a desire to save orphaned and abused elephants, and a desire to protect biodiversity. Kara Bassett is just like you and me. But ladies and gentlemen of the jury, instead of saving elephants, instead of saving abused elephants like she does every day, she's in this courtroom today and forced to relive every moment of the worst day of her life. As the government and Ms. Desai forced her to relive the moment where her husband walked out on her, where her husband abandoned her. Now, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, today the government bore the burden of proof. They had to prove beyond a reasonable doubt, beyond hesitation, beyond moral certainty, as it says in your jury instructions, that Kara Bassett killed Don Clark. And ladies and gentlemen of the jury, you don't have to be a police officer to realize they didn't meet that burden. It's common sense. They neglected the truth at every point of their investigation. And the neglection of the truth began with the government's first and only witness, Senior Agent Steph Branham, in his investigation. Now, Ms. Desai just came before you and told you all about the boots, all about the algae. However, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, she intentionally omitted the truth from you. She didn't tell you the truth. The truth is that the government, well, they didn't test, so they can't know. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the Federal Bureau of Investigation admits this. They told you that they didn't test the rocks, the bodies of water, the puddles, the mud, the grass at the elephant park. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, that alone is enough reasonable doubt to acquit. And it's enough reasonable doubt to acquit because Joe Young told you that the boots that Ms. Desai focused on in her closing were Kara Bassett's work boots. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, if they didn't test the boots that Kara interacted with daily, if they didn't test the bodies of water, if they didn't test the rocks, they cannot know. But it's not just scientific principle that the government neglected. They also neglected relevant evidence. They neglected over 2,000 hours of footage that Joe Young took at the property that exonerates Ms. Bassett. And you saw that footage today, ladies and gentlemen. The FBI didn't want to see it, but you did. And ladies and gentlemen of the jury, that footage shows Kara Bassett shocked. It shows her abandoned, it shows her broken, and it shows her destroyed.
My husband is gone. It's been more than a week. He hasn't called or texted or anything. I don't know where he's at, and I'm really worried about him.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, there was no motive, there was no plan, there was no execution, there were no toxins, there was no killing. Kara Bassett simply went to sleep on August 18th of 2017. And Agent Branham, well, he told you that he had evidence of this. But what did he do? He intentionally neglected the truth. The government today wants you to convict an abandoned widow who was asleep of murder. But ladies and gentlemen of the jury, they have no evidence. Ms. Desai came before you moments ago and said that Kara Bassett killed her husband, Don Clark. But Agent Branham, he disputes this. You heard his testimony here today. He told you there were no eyewitnesses, there was no camera footage, there was no forensic evidence, there was no medical evidence, there was no written evidence, there was no evidence, and he even admitted it to you. He told you there was no evidence that could definitively prove Kara Bassett murdered Don Clark. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, that is reasonable doubt, and that's reasonable doubt enough to acquit. But furthermore, Agent Branham told you that there was no body, there was no autopsy, there was no medically confirmed death. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I don't have to tell you that you need an autopsy. You need a death, and you need a murder weapon to convict someone of murder. But none of those things exist in today's trial. Don't take my word for it. Take the word of Agent Branham, who told you that he had none of those things. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, today, the government came before you and tried to put words in your mouth. However, the defense counsel is not here to do it. We're here just to present the truth, and the truth is clear. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the facts are indisputable. At 8 p.m. on August 17th of 2017, Kara Bassett went to sleep. When she awoke, her husband left her. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, going to sleep in the United States of America is not a crime, and it surely isn't murder. It's common sense. The government offered you no evidence to prove she was awake, and Agent Branham admitted he had no evidence. Kara Bassett is not a murderer. The evidence, or better, the lack of evidence in this case, proves this to us. Kara Bassett is an abandoned widow who went to sleep and awoke to the crossfire of the government's baseless conspiracy theories, whose own FBI agent tells you they have no evidence, and awoke to the government's neglection. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, give Kara back her passion, give Kara back her hope, give Kara back her future, and find her the way she truly is, innocent. Return with a verdict based on fact, not fiction as the government wants you to do. Find her not guilty. Thank you.
Government, do you have a rebuttal?
Yes, Your Honor, we do.
Okay, go ahead whenever you're ready.
She was asleep. That's what Attorney Chin-Lenn just tried to convince you of. He tried to use smoke and mirrors to tell you that Kara Bassett was just sleeping on the night in question. But ladies and gentlemen, when they ask you to ignore the threats the defendant made to her husband, when they ask you to ignore the precise match of algae found on the defendant's boots with Big Gum Swamp, when they ask you to ignore that as of 6 p.m. on August 18th, all syringes were in the shed, when they ask you to ignore that the defendant was the last one with her husband on the night in question, they're not asking you to find reasonable doubt. They're asking you to doubt your reason. Find the defendant guilty. Because she wasn't asleep, ladies and gentlemen. She knew that when he went missing, she made millions. Thank you.
Thank you both. Judges, please complete your ballots and click submit. I'll have everyone just stay on the call until we get all of the ballots, and then we'll do some really quick comments. So just hang tight.
I'm stopping the recording.